The stone that fell from the sky does not merely tell us where it came from. It tells us where something is missing. That may sound like a tiny detail, almost an absurd one, because a meteorite weighs only a few grams or a few kilograms. It enters the atmosphere as a surviving fragment and eventually ends up on a laboratory table beneath a cold light. Yet within that fragment there may be the trace of an entire world. Not just any asteroid, not a wandering rock, an ancient body, perhaps as large as the Moon, perhaps even approaching the scale of Mars, orbiting the Sun when the solar system was still a young furnace, unstable, crowded with objects that grew too quickly and died even faster. The idea seems plausible for a simple reason: meteorites are archives. They are not merely debris. They are physical samples from eras that Earth has erased through oceans, volcanoes, shifting continents, and billions of years of erosion. If something has survived beyond our planet, far from its destructive cycles, it may preserve information older than the oldest rocks on Earth. But this is precisely where the uncertainty begins. A meteorite does not arrive with a label attached. It does not plainly announce, "I come from a lost planet." It must be read through isotopes, minerals, cooling histories, minute chemical ratios, thermal signatures, and differences so subtle they appear to be errors until they emerge again and again. And when those signatures resemble neither Earth nor Mars nor the Moon, and fail to fit comfortably within any known family of asteroids, the fragment ceases to be merely a stone. It becomes a question. The meteorite at the center of this story is known as Northwest Africa 12774. It was discovered in the Sahara Desert and classified as an angrite, part of an exceptionally rare family of volcanic meteorites. That alone is a disturbing clue. Angrites are not primitive rocks in the ordinary sense. They are not simply compressed cosmic dust. They are rocks that have lived through an internal history. They were born from molten material, from magma, within a body large enough to heat itself, differentiate, separate minerals, and perhaps even build a crust. In other words, they do not merely speak of accumulation. They speak of geology. And geology requires time, heat, and mass. A pebble does not create a volcanic world. A fragile pile of rubble does not easily generate ancient lava flows, orderly crystals, and coherent chemical signatures. Something more ambitious is required. A planetary embryo. But if such a planetary embryo once existed, if these rocks truly came from it, where did it go? That is the central fracture running through the story. The solar system we see today appears orderly only because we are looking at the survivors. Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, the asteroids, the gas giants, the moons. Together they seem to form a complete family. Yet meteorites tell a different story, one populated by temporary worlds, some large, some small, born and destroyed before Earth had fully become Earth. During the first tens of millions of years, the young sun was surrounded by a disk of gas and dust. Tiny grains stuck together, grew into pebbles, then planetesimals, and eventually into bodies massive enough to attract still more material. But this growth was anything but peaceful. Every new body was also a potential projectile. Every orbit was only a temporary promise. Gravity did not merely build, it selected, distorted, launched, and shattered. A body the size of the Moon, in such an environment, was not necessarily destined to become a planet. It may have been little more than a rehearsal, a cosmic draft waiting to be erased. The strangest thing is that its destruction may have left behind traces more legible than its existence. When a planetary body is destroyed, it does not vanish like a flame. It fragments. Some pieces plunge into the sun. Others are swallowed by growing planets. Still others remain on chaotic orbits, only to be struck again, reduced, mixed, scattered into the asteroid belt, or hurled onto trajectories that one day intersect Earth. And so a modern laboratory may receive, in the form of a meteorite, a fragment of a catastrophe that unfolded more than 4.5 billion years ago. The paradox is that the tiny object survives precisely because the larger world did not. In the case of the angrites, that survival carries particular significance because their ages point to processes that occurred almost immediately after the birth of the solar system. We are not dealing with a rock that formed when the planets were already mature. We are looking at a relic from an era when short-lived radioactive elements such as aluminum-26 could still provide enough heat to melt the interiors of small worlds. That detail changes everything. If a body forms early enough, it can heat itself from within, separate metals from silicates, generate magma, and produce basaltic rocks. If it forms too late, that isotopic fuel has already decayed away, leaving the body colder, less transformed, and more primitive. The meteorite therefore tells us not only about the composition of its parent body. It also tells us about its timing. That world must have formed at exactly the right moment. Early enough to ignite, large enough to evolve, and unfortunate enough not to survive. Yet the most unsettling aspect is not its age. It is its difference. Analyses suggest that the body from which it came was not simply a smaller version of Earth or Mars. Its chemistry points towards source materials unlike those represented by the surviving planets. It is as though one were to find, in a library, a page written in a language clearly related to all the others, yet not identical to any of them. You recognize that it belongs to the same era, the same system, the same primordial fire, but you cannot fit it neatly into the book you already know. At that point, the solar system ceases to be a linear story. It is no longer a tidy sequence in which dust becomes planets. Instead, it becomes a landscape of lost possibilities. Every rare meteorite may be a splinter from a failed experiment in planetary construction, and every failed experiment may have influenced the success of the worlds that remained. Because a destroyed world is not useless. Its fragments can become ingredients. They can fall onto other embryos, enrich them, alter their composition, and reshape their inventories of water, metals, and volatile elements. Perhaps some of the material from that lost body ended up inside Earth. Perhaps it became part of Mars. Perhaps it still lies hidden within the asteroid belt, indistinguishable among millions of nameless rocks. The meteorite, then, is not merely evidence of destruction. It is evidence of transfer. A world can die and still continue building others. That is one of the most difficult ideas to grasp when we look up at the night sky. We see stability, yet stability is the final product of selective violence. Earth itself was not born pure. It is an assembly of impacts, melting events, differentiation, atmospheric losses, falling debris, and giant collisions. The Moon most likely emerged from a colossal impact between the proto-Earth and another body roughly the size of a planetary embryo. That model, even though its details remain debated, has already accustomed us to an uncomfortable fact. The birth of rocky worlds proceeds through events that, on a human scale, we would call annihilation. But a meteorite such as Northwest Africa 12774 adds something subtler still. It does not merely speak of an impact that created a moon or altered a visible planet. It speaks of a body that may have left behind no recognizable astronomical monument at all, no surviving orbit, no observable crater, no obvious remnant. Only mineralogical and chemical signatures locked inside a dark fragment. And if a single stone can allow us to reconstruct a lost world, how many worlds are missing from our map? How many protoplanets were absorbed before they could acquire names? How many objects large enough to possess volcanoes, crusts, and differentiated interiors disappeared before the solar system settled into the form we recognize today? The answer is not written directly. It is scattered through ratios of oxygen, calcium, aluminum, titanium, and chromium, through crystals examined beneath microscopes, through radiometric ages and textures left behind by the cooling of unimaginably ancient magmas. That is why the discovery matters. Not because it simply suggests there was one more planet. It matters because it forces us to rethink what we mean by the word planet itself. A planet is not only something that survives long enough to receive a name. It can also be a stage, a passage, an unfinished geological organism. It can be a body that possessed an internal history, a temperature, a surface, perhaps a crust, perhaps volcanoes, perhaps impacts, and was later dismantled by the very processes that were building all the others. From this perspective, the rarest meteorites are not souvenirs from space. They are mineral obituaries. They speak of worlds we will never see, yet worlds that nonetheless helped shape our own origin. And precisely because they speak through the smallest of remnants, meteorites must be interpreted with almost surgical caution. To say that a meteorite reveals an ancient body as large as the moon does not mean imagining a perfect sphere illuminated by the young sun, complete with mountains and plains resembling those of the lunar surface. It means following a chain of clues. First, the rock is volcanic, which means the material from which it formed was once molten. Second, melting requires either internal heat or extraordinarily energetic events. Third, its composition does not correspond easily to any of the major planetary reservoirs already known. Fourth, the rarity of angrites suggests a specific origin rather than a widespread and common process. Yet every step in that chain contains a degree of uncertainty. Science does not eliminate mystery in a single stroke. It narrows it. It transforms fog into outline. And the outline that emerges is that of a world born extraordinarily early, at a time when the protoplanetary disk was still saturated with energy and collisions. Its surface, if it possessed one, can hardly have resembled a quiet landscape. It was likely an environment of heat, fractures, relentless impacts, and materials that solidified only to be shattered again. Its sky, if that word can even be applied to such a primitive body, was not truly a sky at all. It was a moving field of debris illuminated by a young sun, perhaps more active than the one we know today, surrounded by dust, lingering gas, and countless growing fragments. In such a place, the distance between birth and destruction could be remarkably short. A body could attain the dimensions of a planetary embryo only to encounter another object traveling on a slightly different orbit. No exceptionally rare collision was required, at least not in the human sense. In an overcrowded system, collision was a form of evolution. Worlds did not meet by accident. They were gradually driven toward one another by gravitational resonances, mutual attraction, orbital migration, and the perturbations of larger bodies. When impact finally occurred, the energy involved was sufficient to melt, vaporize, and eject. Part of the body could be shattered into immense fragments. Part could fall back onto itself. Part could merge with the target. Part could become invisible, not because it had been completely destroyed, but because it had been incorporated elsewhere. This is the deepest form of cosmic loss, not disappearance, but indistinguishability. If that lost world contributed material to the rocky planets, then our own planet may contain atoms that once belonged to bodies that no longer possess an orbit, a shape, or even a recognizable identity. Earth would be, in part, a perfectly living cemetery. Every continent, every ocean, every mountain range could be the product of a genealogy that includes worlds long since erased. And for a brief moment, a rare meteorite allows us to separate one of those hidden threads from the larger tapestry. But there is another consequence, perhaps even more surprising. If the early solar system contained differentiated bodies that were later destroyed, then the planets that survived may not represent the full diversity of the original materials from which everything began. This is a subtle but profound mistake. Looking at what remains and assuming that what remains is the complete catalog of possibilities. It is like studying a forest after a fire and concluding that only the trees still standing ever existed. Rare meteorites are the charred trunks preserved beneath the ash. They reveal that there were other species, other structures, other chemical combinations. Some left no visible descendants. Others survive only as anonymous ingredients mixed into later worlds. This realization also changes the way we think about planetary systems around other stars. When astronomers observe distant disks of dust and young planets, they often see chaos, rings, gaps, collisions, hot clouds of debris, and worlds migrating through unstable environments. For a long time, it was tempting to regard that chaos as a temporary disorder, a phase that would eventually settle into stability. But perhaps chaos is not merely a stage to be overcome. Perhaps it is a creative mechanism. It produces worlds, destroys them, recycles their remains, selects certain compositions over others, and determines which planets will grow large enough to endure and which will be reduced to fragments. The meteorite from the Sahara thus becomes a tiny lens pointed not only at our own past but at a universal process. Every young star may once have possessed its own missing worlds. Every orderly planetary system may be built upon an invisible population of lost bodies. And perhaps the difference between a system that eventually hosts habitable planets and one that remains sterile depends, in part, on collisions that left behind no planets at all, only ingredients. The iron concentrated within a planetary core, the water hidden within a mantle, the radioactive elements that sustain internal heat, the volatile compounds that eventually become atmospheres, all of these can be redistributed by ancient impacts. A catastrophic collision may appear to be nothing more than destruction. Yet on planetary scales, destruction and creation are often the same event viewed from different moments in time. First comes the flash. Then the debris. Then new orbits. Then renewed accretion. Then, much later, a planet that appears to have formed naturally and peacefully, as though it had always been destined to exist. What our intuition lacks is time. We separate events because our lives are short. The cosmos connects them because it possesses millions of years in which to do so. An ancient volcanic rock can be formed, ejected, preserved, struck again, liberated from its original orbit, sent toward Earth, and finally collected in a desert after a journey that spans almost the entire history of the solar system. When we examine it, we do not see that journey. We see a dark surface, a crystalline interior, a catalog number. But the catalog number is merely a mask. Behind it lies an environment that no longer exists. There is a young sun unlike the relatively calm star we know today. There is a disk of matter silently determining which worlds will have a future. There is a body large enough to melt, differentiate, and evolve internally, yet not fortunate enough to survive the gravitational lottery of its age. And there is the final, almost impossible act. A fragment of that vanished world reaches us and compels our era to remember something it has never actually seen. That is why this discovery is not merely an astronomical curiosity. It is a correction of cosmic memory. It reminds us that origin is not a clean line, but a layering of interrupted births. It reminds us that planets are not isolated objects, but collective outcomes. It reminds us that what we call the solar system is also the sum of everything that is no longer there. And perhaps that is the most vertiginous realization of all. The story of Earth, the Moon, Mars, and the meteorites remains incomplete if it includes only the bodies we can still point to in the sky. It must also include the worlds that were ground down, absorbed, scattered, and transformed into isotopic signatures and microscopic crystals. It must include nameless worlds. Worlds that never had enough time to become familiar, yet possessed enough mass to become real. A meteorite cannot give us back their appearance. It cannot show us the color of their surfaces, the shape of their craters, or the geometry of their fractures. What it can do, however, may be even more powerful. It can prove that their absence still carries weight. It weighs in the chemistry of planets, in theories of planetary formation, and in the way we imagine our own origin. The lost world hidden within the meteorite is therefore not a poetic ghost. It is a physical possibility engraved in matter, a residue of heat and collision, proof that the young solar system was richer, more violent, and more experimental than the order we see today suggests. And when a stone from the Sahara forces us to take a vanished planet seriously, the very idea of the past changes scale. It is no longer something that lies behind us. It is something that still falls from the sky, enters our laboratories, passes through our microscopes, and tells us, in silence, that to understand living worlds, we must first learn to read the dead. If you have made it this far, it means you love curiosity as much as we do. If you enjoyed this journey, leave a like, write a comment, and subscribe to the channel. It is the best way to support what we do. Your presence truly makes a difference. Until our next exploration.